This is a PowerPoint presentation of muscles of the upper limb, including the arm, the forearm, and excluding the hands. In order to be safe all the time and work properly, we have to have our feet on the ground, and this is going to happen because we are always referring back to the basics of things, and the basics of anatomy is that it is visual and descriptive science. Now you should know what this means. If you don't, then we always study anatomy looking at images or other things and describe them. If you have a problem, then remember. One of the basic facts that we should follow in our university life is that we should not study hard. We should study smart. We should use our intelligence in gaining our information, and we should depend less and less on our memory. Do you feel that you are less than half charged and you don't have enough fuel to gain knowledge? Then let us refuel our knowledge by asking questions. Always ask questions. Minimum is 5 questions, and ask yourself these questions before others ask you, like before the exams ask you, and get answers. And if you do that, you can learn a lot. This is a basic fact of learning, and there are more questions than answers. Remember the rule of 5. The rule of 5 is a very good way of solving problems. Always ask questions. What is the minimum number of questions I should ask myself? It is 5 questions that would solve almost any problem. After asking 5 questions and answering them, then almost every problem will be solved, and you will go through the obstacle in front of your understanding. Let's ask ourselves a few questions about muscles. How are muscles arranged? They're arranged in groups. What do? They move joints or other structures than joints. What kind of action muscles do? They are doing the pulling force. What kind of actions muscles have? Usually, a single muscle has a main action and may have a minor action or two. Let's ask ourselves several questions. We should always remember that the muscle action is what? It is a force. Any force should have directions in one or two or more In order to understand the muscular system and its actions, we need to know very good knowledge of synovial joints, the most movable joints in the body. What else do we need to know? We need to know each joint, what does it do? In order to understand the subject we are studying, we should never miss that we collect data, we analyze it, and we discuss it, and we share it with other people so that we can know whether we are collecting correct information or not. And we should never forget the rule of 5. This is an image of the anterior part of the arm. So let's ask a few questions and answer them. Which muscle is this? It is the biceps brachii. It is showing us that superiorly it is between pectoralis major and deltoid, and lower down it has two parts, the biceps brachii tendon and the biceps brachii aponeurosis. Aponeurosis is a flat tendon. A closer look at the anterior compartment of the arm, and let's ask a few questions. What is this muscle? It is the most anterior muscle in the arm, the biceps brachii. Lower down it has a biceps tendon, and medially it has a biceps aponeurosis. Now, deep to the biceps brachii, we can see another muscle of the arm, which is the brachialis. It is covered by the biceps, and we can see it on both sides of the biceps brachii. The biceps tendon, when it goes down, it lies between two muscles. This one is brachioradialis, and medially is the pronator teres. We are going to use this piece of information, the tendon of the biceps brachii, and what is lateral and what is medial to it. This is an anterior view of the muscles of the chest and the arm. So let's ask a few questions and answer them. This is the biceps brachii muscle, the most anterior muscle of the arm, and it has two heads. This is a lateral one, which is called the long head, and this is the medial one, which is called the short head, and they meet and form the muscle. And this is the tendon of the biceps brachii, and you know what muscle is this? This is the pectoralis major. And what is this? This is the deltoid muscle, and the two heads of the biceps, they can be found between pectoralis major and deltoid. And lower down we see the biceps tendon, and the muscle lateral to it is brachioradialis. Let's ask ourselves questions and answer them about this view. What is this view? This is a view of shoulder joint, and this is a point called supraclinoid tubercle, where the long head of the biceps is attached. As the biceps tendon goes down, which lies between this structure. What is this structure? This is the greater tuberosity of the humerus, and this is the lesser tuberosity of the humerus. What is this image showing me? It is showing me the lateral view of the shoulder joint and how the long head of the biceps is going down. What can I see in this image? It is a lateral view of the shoulder joint, and the long head of biceps is running in a groove between the greater and lesser tuberosity of the humerus. It is called the biceptal groove because of the long tendon of the biceps brachii. It is also called intertubercular groove. Here are the questions we asked and we answered them. Let's ask ourselves a few questions. What are we looking at? We are looking at lateral view of the shoulder joint, and here we can see that the shoulder joint has a capsule, and the long tendon of the biceps brachii is coming out through a hole in the capsule. Right, few questions. What is this? This is the lower end of biceps brachii. It's called the biceps tendon, and it is going to cross the elbow joint, and it ends up in this place. What is this place? This is the insertion of biceps brachii. It is the radial tuberosity. Questions. What is this area? It is showing us that as the biceps brachii inserts into the radial tuberosity, now between the tendon of the biceps and the tuberosity there is this blue structure. This is called a bursa. A bursa is a sac filled with synovial fluid to prevent friction and prevent damage to the tendon. Now, few questions about this image. What are we looking at? We are looking at anterior view of shoulder joint, and what is this? This is a red mark on the tip of the coracoid process. It indicates the attachment of the short head of biceps muscle. What do we see in this image? We can see that the short head of the biceps muscle is attached to the tip of the coracoid process of scapula. Right. Few questions about this situation. This is the tendon of pectoralis minor attached to the coracoid process medial to the short head of biceps brachii. What is happening here? The short head has joined the long head and formed the biceps brachii. We can see that there is a muscle deep to the biceps brachii, which is the brachialis muscle. Right, let's study this situation. What's happening here? Is the short head of biceps coming out of the coracoid, and this is the long head coming from the supraglenoid tubercle, and this is pectoralis major muscle. Look at this situation here. The pectoralis major muscle is going to be inserted into the lateral lip of biceptal groove, but it passes between the two heads of biceps brachii, and this is the long head coming down, and this is short head coming down and joined together. Right, it's time for questions and answers. What is this image showing? It is showing the elbow joint where the biceps muscle comes down to be inserted into its destination. First of all, the biceps tendon comes and inserts into the radial tuberosity with a synovial bursa between them. And next is the biceps muscle aponeurosis. Questions and answers. What is this? This is the second part of the end of the biceps brachii, the biceps aponeurosis, and it turns to the back and enclosing several flexor muscles. This is pronator teres, this is palmaris longus, and this is flexor carpi radialis, and this is flexor carpi. What is this image telling me? It is telling me that the biceps brachii main action is flexor of the elbow joint. That means it decreases the angle between the forearm and the arm. Let us summarize the story of biceps brachii. What does it do? It flexes the forearm and flexes the arm because it arises from higher up of the shoulder joint, especially the long head, and it supinates. That means it puts the palm from posterior to anterior. That's the short head, and the short head is coming from the tip of the coracoid process, and this is the long head that comes from supraglenoid tubercle of the scapula, and this is the insertion of the biceps brachii on the tuberosity of the radius, and it is supplied by a nerve to the anterior compartment called musculocutaneous nerve. Now, where are we now? We are looking at the shoulder joint from the anterior, and what is the question? The question is, what is this muscle? This muscle is pectoralis minor, and it is inserted into the coracoid process just medial to the origin of short head of biceps brachii. What can we see in this image? We can see that this is the pectoralis minor attached to the rib 3, 4, and 5, and it comes to the coracoid process of the scapula, and there is a muscle that comes from the scapula and just behind the coracoid process. This is the subscapularis muscle, and superiorly we can see that the supraspinatus muscle is superior to the coracoid process. Question: where are we now? We are looking at the back of the shoulder joint, where we can see the scapula and the spine of the scapula. What is this muscle? This muscle is called coracobrachialis. That means it comes from the coracoid process of the scapula and goes to the humerus. This is a shadow of the coracoid process, because the coracoid process is anterior, and this is the way it inserts into the upper part of the shaft of the humerus. And what does it do? One of its action is it adducts the arm. Question: what are we looking at? We are looking at a lateral view of the shoulder joint, where we can see that this is the coracoid process, and this coracobrachialis muscle is attached here, and then we have this point, which is the medial side of the humerus, lower part of the upper humerus, or in the middle of the shaft of the humerus. This image explains to us why this coracobrachialis, in addition to the action of adduction, it does flexion of the arm. Question: what is this? This is the coracoid process holding the upper end of the coracobrachialis, and the coracobrachialis comes down on the medial side of the humerus after crossing shoulder joint and attaches here on the medial border of the humerus, and this is the coracobrachialis muscle. What does it do? It flexes and adducts the arm at the shoulder joint. After seeing several images of the coracobrachialis muscle, let's write a few notes about it. First part of the name is coracoid, because it's coming from the coracoid process of the scapula. Second part of the name is brachialis, that means the humerus. And what does it do? It flexes the shoulder joint, it adducts the shoulder joint, and the arm is flexed and is being adducted. Now, the coracoid process, now it's part of the scapula, and the muscle goes down to be inserted in the medial side of the humerus. Question: what is this view? This is an anterior view of the arm, and you can see a muscle called brachialis. Now, the biceps brachii has been removed, and the brachialis comes from where? It comes from the anterior part of the shaft of the humerus and inserts into the upper part of the ulna, something we will know very soon. Now, we have questions and answers for the following images. These images about the muscle called brachialis. And here is the brachialis coming from the anterior surface of the humerus and going down, crossing the elbow joint. So its action is going to be mainly on the elbow joint. This is a mark of the origin of the brachialis. It comes from the lower half of anterior surface of the humerus plus the intermuscular septum, fibrous tissue on both sides of the humerus separating the anterior from posterior compartments, and this is the coronoid process of the ulna, the way where it is inserted into, and here we have lateral view of the humerus, where we can see that the anterior muscle is biceps brachii, and deep to it is the brachialis. What are we seeing here? We are seeing lateral view of the arm, where we can see a muscle coming from the anterior surface of the humerus, crossing the elbow joint and inserts higher up into the forearm bones. This is a closer view with the action of the brachialis muscle. What does the brachialis do? It flexes the elbow joint. That means it decreases the angle between the forearm and the arm. And here is a flexion position of the elbow joint. Let's start our session with studying the anterior muscles of the arm and what is the anterior group of muscles of the arm contain. They contain the biceps brachii. Why biceps brachii? Biceps because it has two heads, and brachii meaning the arm, because we have another biceps in the leg called biceps femoris, and we will study the brachialis and the coracobrachialis. Questions and answers about this view. What is this view? This is a posterior view of the humerus, the arm. And I know this because I can see the scapula and its spine. And I can see a muscle. This muscle is called triceps because it has three heads, and brachii because it is posterior to the brachium, the humerus. It has three heads. The medial one is the long head coming from scapula, and the lateral head coming from the humerus, and between the lateral and the long head we have the third head, which is called the medial head of the triceps. Question: what is this view? This is a posterior view of the arm. What can I see in this view? I can see triceps brachii. I can see the medial head, and now I am seeing it for the first time because the lateral head has been removed.
Now, what do we have here? This is what kind of view? It is a posterolateral view showing a muscle in the posterior compartment of the arm. We need to ask questions to gain knowledge. What is this tendon? This muscle has 3 tendons. Superiorly, this is a long tendon, and it comes from the supraglenoid tubercle of the scapula, and this is the lateral head, which is coming from the humerus, and they make the muscle belly and insert on the olecranon process of the ulna, and when this muscle contracts, it produces extension of the elbow joint. Now this muscle is called triceps because it has 3 heads. What we see here is only 2 heads because there is another head which is medial, and it is shorter than these 2, and takes origin from the posterior surface of the humerus plus the intermuscular septum, and the result is that we have 3 heads of this muscle. We can see 2, the third is hidden. So this is the long head, and this is the lateral head, and this muscle produces extension of the elbow joint.
Now let's write some notes about the triceps that we have seen in the few past slides. It is called triceps brachii, and what does it do? It extends the forearm at the elbow joint, plus the long head extends and adducts the arm. Why? Because it comes from the infraglenoid tubercle and it crosses the shoulder joint. Therefore, it extends and adducts the arm. Now, the long head comes from the infraglenoid process of scapula. The lateral head comes from the posterolateral humerus and its intermuscular septum, separating the anterior from the posterior compartments. And this oval-shaped dotted line is the place where the medial head is coming from. Posteromedial surface of lower half of the humerus, and it is supplied by the radian nerve, the nerve of extension. Let us collect some information about this muscle, the colored muscle. This muscle is called brachial because it comes from the supracondylar ridge, and radialis because it goes down and inserts on the radius. So this is the brachioradialis muscle. It is on the lateral side of the arm, and again this is the brachioradialis muscle. What does it do? It flexes the elbow because it only crosses the elbow. It does not cross the wrist joint, and it helps in pronation and supination. These are two opposite actions, but when the hand is in mid position, if you want to pronate, it helps, and back to mid position, if you want to supinate, it is going to help supination. Now, what is the next piece of information do I need to know? I need to know from where is it coming. It's coming from the upper 2/3 of the lateral supracondylar ridge of the humerus. And the next piece of information is where is it going? It's going to the styloid process of the radius. And then what nerve is supplying it? It's the radial nerve. What is this image? This image is showing the lower end of radius and ulna, the carpal bones and the metacarpal bones. Now, we were talking about the brachioradialis, and the question to be asked here, where does it insert in this area? It is going to insert in the styloid process of the radius. Where am I, and what is this image? It shows the anterior compartment of the forearm. Now, brachioradialis is a landmark because it separates the flexor compartment anteriorly from the extensor compartment posteriorly, and therefore some people consider it as a lateral compartment. And here is the brachioradialis muscle coming lateral to the biceps tendon, and it goes distally and to be inserted into the styloid process of the radius. Let's ask ourselves a few questions and answer them on this view. What is this view showing? It's showing the superficial muscles of the anterior forearm. That means the flexor compartment. Now, we usually refer to the brachioradialis as lateral, and then we go medial. So this is the biceps tendon, a very important landmark when we study the flexor compartment. And lateral to it is the brachioradialis muscle. And then we go medial to the biceps tendon, and this is what is called the pronator teres muscle. Next to it, a muscle that goes from medial to lateral, and it is the flexor carpi radialis. Then we have this yellow muscle medial to the flexor carpi radialis. It is called palmaris longus. You can see that the tendon is very long and the fleshy part is short. And then when we go medially, of course, it's going to be something ulnaris. So it is flexor carpi ulnaris. So let's go through it again. Biceps tendon is an important landmark. Laterally is the brachioradialis, and then on the medial side of biceps tendon is the pronator teres, then flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and flexor carpi ulnaris. Next, the upper part of the forearm, the anterior compartment. So let's ask ourselves questions and answer them. What is this muscle? This is the most lateral muscle in the anterior compartment. It is, of course, brachioradialis, and it is lateral to biceps tendon. Biceps tendon is a very important landmark in studying the anterior group of muscles. Now, just medial to the biceps tendon is the pronator teres, and then we go medially, it is the flexor carpi radialis, and then the palmaris longus. Again, this is an anterior view of the forearm, and let us ask ourselves a few questions. What is this structure? It is biceps tendon. The lateral muscle to the biceps tendon is brachioradialis, and then we go medial to the brachioradialis and biceps tendon, and this muscle here that makes a V shape with the brachioradialis and the biceps tendon is in the middle. This is pronator teres. Then we go down, and medially we're going to see this muscle next to the pronator teres, and it is the flexor carpi radialis. And then we go more medially, it is palmaris longus. And then the most medial muscle is the flexor carpi ulnaris. Here is a simple way of remembering these superficial muscles of the forearm. If you start from the radial side, from the thumb side, then it is pronator teres, and then you start going medially. The next is going to be flexor carpi radialis. Next, medially is palmaris longus, and of course the most medial one is flexor carpi ulnaris. Let us collect and discuss the pronator teres muscle and ask ourselves a few questions. What is this structure? Of course, this is the key structure in locating these muscles of the anterior compartment of the forearm, and it is biceps brachii tendon. If we go lateral, then we will find the brachioradialis muscle. Then we have the colored muscle, which is the pronator teres, coming from supracondylar ridge, the upper part of supracondylar ridge, going obliquely towards the middle part of the shaft of the radius. So we have a triangle here made by brachioradialis and the pronator teres. If we go medially, we will find the flexor carpi radialis. Back to this image where we can see 4 fingers without the thumb put obliquely on the anterior compartment of the forearm and approaching the forearm from the medial side. Then the most lateral of these muscles is the pronator teres. What is this and where are we? Let's ask ourselves a few questions and try to answer them. What is this? This is an epicondyle of the humerus. What is this? This is the ulna. And this is the radius, the lateral bone of the forearm. And this red area represents a point of attachment of this muscle on the medial supracondylar ridge. And this point represents, well, let's say it is the coronoid process of the ulna, and then this represents another point of attachment on the middle shaft of the radius. So here is the origin of this muscle, which is the medial supracondylar ridge of the humerus, and this is the muscle going towards the shaft of the radius. What is this muscle? It is pronator teres. This is what? Let us ask ourselves a few questions. This is the anterior view of the forearm, and the circle is around the medial epicondyle, and here is a muscle going from the medial epicondyle obliquely towards the radius. So this is the pronator teres, which is going towards the middle part of the shaft of the radius. What is this? Next to the pronator teres, going down from the same supracondylar ridge, going towards the base of the thumb. This is the flexor carpi radialis. Then medially, we can see a thin muscle here. This is the palmaris longus, and attached to the palmar aponeurosis, and most medial one is the flexor carpi ulnaris. Let's analyze this image of the anterior part of the forearm. What is this muscle? This muscle is in the arm, and it is the biceps brachii. If you go lateral to the biceps brachii, you will find the brachioradialis making the curve of forearm, and then go medial to the biceps brachii tendon. It is the pronator teres coming from the medial side of the biceps brachii and then disappearing under the brachioradialis, going for the shaft of the radius. What is this muscle? This muscle is coming inferior to pronator teres from the medial supracondylar ridge, going towards the lateral side. This is the flexor carpi radialis, and this muscle here is the palmaris longus, and the most medial muscle is flexor carpi ulnaris. Here's the image of pronator teres. It has two heads. One head coming from the supracondylar ridge of the humerus. The other head is coming from the coronoid process of the ulna, and it is going to the middle of the shaft of the radius. What does this image explain? Let's ask a few questions. This is an arm representing the palm anteriorly, so this is in the form of supination. And then follow the green arrow, and you can see that the palm is posterior and dorsum of the hand is anterior, and this is pronation done by the pronator teres. This is what muscle? It is the pronator teres, of course. And what does it do? It pronates the forearm, and it's coming from the medial supracondylar ridge. Many muscles of the anterior compartment of the forearm arise from this area, the supracondylar ridge, or from the medial epicondyle directly, and this is called the common flexor tendon. And then the other head is coming from the coronoid process of the ulna. It is called the deep or ulnar head, and it goes and inserts into midpoint of the lateral side of shaft of the radius, and it is supplied by the median nerve. The median nerve passes between the two heads of pronator teres. The colored muscle of the anterior superficial layer of the forearm, this is flexor carpi radialis. So let us ask a few questions and try to answer them. Now, this is the flexor carpi radialis going towards the wrist, and it is coming from the medial epicondyle supracondylar ridge common flexor origin. This is the medial epicondyle of the humerus, and the key structure is the biceps tendon. Just medial to the biceps tendon, you will find the pronator teres muscle, and flexor carpi radialis is medial to the pronator teres muscle. And if you look more medial to the flexor carpi radialis, you will find the palmaris longus. And in this image, you can see that the middle finger represents the position and direction of flexor carpi radialis. So let's ask ourselves a few questions about this view of the anterior compartment of the forearm, flexor group of muscles, and this is the flexor carpi radialis. Why this is the flexor carpi radialis? Go and find the tendon of biceps brachii, then medial to it, find the pronator teres, and this is the flexor carpi radialis. What muscle is this? This is the flexor carpi radialis. It's coming from the medial epicondyle of the humerus, and it is going towards the wrist. Here at the wrist, you can see that the tendon is bifurcated into two parts. This is its insertion. The insertion is going to be at the base of the second and third metacarpal bones. What is this view and what are we supposed to know? Few questions about this picture. It's the insertion of flexor carpi radialis, which has two divisions. First, base of second metacarpal, and then base of the third metacarpal bones. Let us summarize our information about flexor carpi radialis. It is a flexor because it flexes the wrist joint, and because it crosses the wrist, therefore it is called carpi, and radialis comes from the radial side. What does it do? It flexes the wrist because it crosses the wrists. And what else? It abducts the hand because it is attached to the second and third metacarpal bones. From where is it coming? It's coming from common flexor tendon from the humerus and inserts at the base of second and third metacarpal bones. This colored muscle is the palmaris longus, a member of the anterior flexor compartment of the forearm. Now, we should analyze the situation here by asking ourselves several questions and try to answer them. This is the palmaris longus. What is next? It is coming from the common flexor tendon on the medial epicondyle of the humerus, and it is going towards the wrist to be attached to the palmar aponeurosis. Always go back to the tendon of biceps brachii. The medial muscle is pronator teres. Then going immediately is the flexor carpi radialis, and then we have the yellow marked muscle, which is the palmaris longus, and the most lateral muscle is the flexor carpi ulnaris. Let's analyze this image of the anterior part of the forearm. What is this muscle? This muscle is in the arm, and it is the biceps brachii. If you go lateral to the biceps brachii, you will find the brachioradialis making the curve of forearm, and then go medial to the biceps brachii tendon. It is the pronator teres coming from the medial side of the biceps brachii and then disappearing under the brachioradialis, going for the shaft of the radius. What is this muscle? This muscle is coming inferior to pronator teres from the medial supracondylar ridge going towards the lateral side. This is the flexor carpi radialis, and this muscle here is the palmaris longus, and the most medial muscle is flexor carpi palmaris. Let's see what is this movement. Few questions. Which muscle is producing this movement? Is palmaris longus muscle. This is the function of this muscle. What is it? It's flexion of the hand at the wrist. Back to the image you have seen before, and you can see that the ring finger is representing the position and direction of palmaris longus. What is this image telling me, and where is it? Let us ask ourselves a few questions. What is this triangular structure? This is what is called palmar aponeurosis. It is thick fascia at the palm of the hand to make the grip strong enough to hold things. And this palmar aponeurosis must be tightened by a muscle, and this muscle is named as palmaris longus. Let's collect our information about palmaris longus muscle. What does it do? In addition to tightening the palmar aponeurosis, because it pulls it proximally, then this pull proximally is going to produce flexion of the wrist. Now, this colored red muscle is the palmar aponeurosis. It comes from common flexor tendon of the medial epicondyle of the humerus. This is where almost all flexor muscles arise from. And here we are at the destination of palmaris longus. It attaches to the palmar aponeurosis, and it is producing tightening of this aponeurosis for good grip and as well as flexion of the wrist. This is another image of the palmar aponeurosis. Now here we have a muscle, so let's ask ourselves a few questions and try to answer them. If we look higher up, we can see that this is taking origin from the medial epicondyle of the humerus, the common flexor tendon, and then we can see that it is also attached to the upper part of the shaft of the ulna. This is attachment of the upper shaft of the ulna, and this is the one point of origin from the common flexor tendon, and this is the upper shaft of the. This is the anterior compartment of the forearm flexor group of muscles, and let us ask ourselves some questions. What is this muscle? This is flexor carpi ulnaris. Why? This is flexor carpi ulnaris because it is the most medial muscle of the group. Let's analyze this image of the anterior part of the forearm. What is this muscle? This muscle is in the arm, and it is the biceps brachii. If you go lateral to the biceps brachii, you will find the brachioradialis making the curve of forearm, and then go medial to the biceps brachii tendon. It is the pronator teres coming from the medial side of the biceps brachii and then disappearing under the brachioradialis, going for the shaft of the radius. What is this muscle? This muscle is coming inferior to pronator teres from the medial supracondylar ridge going towards the lateral side. This is the flexor carpi radialis, and this muscle here is the palmaris longus, and the most medial muscle is flexor carpi ulnaris. You are familiar with this image. We have seen it several times. Now let's ask ourselves questions related to the flexor carpi ulnaris. This is the site of insertions of flexor carpi ulnaris. Now let's see what is the insertion of flexor carpi ulnaris. Number one is pisiform carpal bone. Number two, hook of the hamate. And number three is base of fifth metacarpal bone. What is this image showing me and why? So let's ask a few questions. Now you can see the anterior compartment of the forearm, and we must now look at the position of the hand. This position is decreasing the angle between the hand and the medial side of the forearm, and that is adduction of the hand. Now let's collect and summarize our information of flexor carpi ulnaris by asking ourselves a few questions. So we are going to summarize the flexor carpi ulnaris. What does it do? It flexes the wrist and adducts the hand, as we have seen in the previous image. And from where is it coming? It's coming from the common flexor tendon. Okay, that is the humeral head, and then it has the ulnar head from the medial border of the olecranon process and upper 2/3 of the posterior border of the ulna, and we have just seen that. And where does it insert? It inserts on the pisiform the hook of hamate, and base of the fifth metacarpal bones. Now, the rest of the muscles of the forearm, the middle and the deep, and the extensor compartment of the forearm will be studied in the musculoskeletal system. And at this point of time, the muscles of the arm, anterior and posterior, and the superficial muscles of the anterior compartment of the forearm are enough at this point of time. Now, what are we going to do next? We are going to address the muscles of the forearm. Now, what do? They do flexion at the wrist and fingers. So they are in the forearm and they do action on the wrist and fingers. And in addition to that, they do pronation. That means when the palm is anterior, it becomes posterior. Now, this muscles of the forearm are divided into anterior compartment and posterior compartment of the forearm. The anterior compartment is made of superficial muscles, intermediate muscle. There is one intermediate muscle and there are deep muscles. At this point of time, we are only addressing the superficial group of muscles, and we will leave the rest of the anterior compartment to the musculoskeletal system. Now, the superficial muscles are flexor carpi ulnaris, palmaris longus, flexor carpi radialis, and pronator teres. Now, the rest of the muscles, the intermediate and the deep, will be left for the musculoskeletal system. But just to have an idea, the intermediate layer contains flexor digitorum superficialis. That means it flexes the phalanges. And the deep ones are flexor digitorum profundus. It does flexion of the phalanges, but deep to the superficialis. There's a special flexor for the thumb, and there is a supinator. Posterior muscles of the forearm we will be seeing in the next. We're going to have a summary and quick look at the posterior compartment of the forearm. The posterior compartment of the forearm is mainly extensors and abductors. So let's start. Where do we start? We start at a muscle that is marked red here, and it is the brachioradialis. This muscle is separating the anterior compartment from the posterior compartment, and from its name it comes from the humerus, the brachium, to the lower end of the radius, and it arises from the medial supracondylar ridge of the lower end of the humerus. This is something you know by now. Now, if we go distally, we will find this muscle. This muscle is the extensor carpi radialis longus. It is more distal to the brachioradialis, and as its name indicates, it is an extensor of the wrist joint on the radial side, and it is a long muscle. It comes from the medial or lateral supracondylar ridge. It comes from the lateral supracondylar ridge. This ridge is also named the common extensor origin. Most of the extensor muscles of the forearm, they come from the lateral supracondylar ridge. And what does it do? It extends the carpal bones and then the hand as a result. Next is the green muscle. The green muscle is the third in sequence, starting from brachioradialis, extensor carpi radialis longus, and this is on the radial side as well. If you don't know which is the radial side, go to the thumb, and the thumb is on the radial side of the forearm. And this muscle comes from the common extensor origin, the lateral supracondylar ridge, and this muscle is called extensor carpi radialis brevis. It is the short extensor of the wrist bones. Then we go to the medial side, the side of the little finger. This muscle is a short muscle, and this is the anconeus muscle. Then on the little finger side, there is this orange colored muscle. It extends from the anconeus on the medial side to the little finger, and this is on the ulnar side of the two bones of the forearm, and this is extensor carpi ulnaris. Next is this green colored muscle that is lateral to the extensor carpi ulnaris and medial to the pink muscle that has four heads, which we are going to mention immediately after this. This muscle is called extensor digiti minimi. It is an extensor of the little finger, and it is not attached to the carpal bones. Otherwise it would have a name of carpi. So it is attached to the base of the little finger. Next is this pink muscle, and this is extensor digitorum communis. This is a very easy muscle to diagnose and to identify, because as you go towards the hand, it is going to have four tendons going to the four medial fingers, and it is not going to the thumb. This is a short summary of the extensor muscles at the back of the forearm. Slide. Now, muscles of the posterior of the forearm, they produce extension at the wrist and fingers. What is this group of muscle going to include? Include the superficial layer, which we are going to address at this point of time, and the deep ones will be left for the musculoskeletal system. This superficial layer is going to include 7 muscles: the brachioradialis, the extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis, extensor digitorum, extensor digiti minimi, extensor carpi ulnaris, and conus. Now, deep ones will be left for the musculoskeletal system.